Hypocrisy. This in the case of former Georgia gubernatorial candidate Stacey Abrams, the longtime Democrat, pivotal in driving turnout in the 2020 presidential election, also the Senate runoffs. Now, Georgia's dopey governor and attorney general, they can learn a lot from her ability to organize on a statewide level. She herself fights for what she believes in. She works extremely hard. Frankly, I respect that. In 2018, Abrams lost her race for governor, and despite the fact that she lost by, well, over 50,000 votes, she refused to concede. She said the election was stolen. She told the voters she actually won. Take a look.
This is not a speech of concession, because concession means to acknowledge an action is right, true, or proper. As a woman of conscience and faith, I cannot concede that.
But will I say that this election was not tainted, was not a disinvestment and a disenfranchisement of thousands of voters? I will not say that.
Do you think the vote was stolen from you? The election was stolen from you?
I think the election was stolen from the people of Georgia.
We had this little election back in 2018, and despite the final tally and the inauguration and the situation we find ourselves in, I do have one very affirmative statement to make. We won.
Sound familiar? Now, is that an incitement to insurrection? To this day, over 2 years later, Abrams still refuses to concede. She says democracy failed Georgia, that mistakes clearly altered the outcome of the election. She even claimed that there were tens of thousands of examples of voter suppression, fraud, abuse, and that this was not a free and not a fair election. Take a look.
Was the election in Georgia statewide a free and fair election?
It was not a free and fair election. We had thousands of Georgians who were purged from the rolls wrongly. It was not fair to the thousands who were forced to wait in long lines because they were polling places that were under-resourced. Or worse, they had no polling places to go to because more than 300 had been closed. It was not fair to the thousands that were put on hold with their registrations. And it was not fair to those who filled up absentee ballots, and depending on the county you sent it to, it either was counted or not counted, assuming you received it in time.
Anyone in the media say she's a liar? Anyone in the media say this was insurrection language? According to Abrams, she is the rightful governor of Georgia. Have Democrats ever accused, the media ever accused Stacey Abrams of inciting insurrection? Has anyone on the left even criticized her claims? Of course not. Now, while Abrams refuses to accept the results in Georgia, dozens of other top Democrats also refuse to this day to accept the results in 2016, and that includes Hillary Clinton herself. After her humiliating loss, she challenged the legitimacy of the results. 2017, she called Donald Trump an illegitimate president. In 2019, she said she would beat him again in 2020. Take a look.
I believe he knows he's an illegitimate president. He knows that there were a bunch of different reasons why the election turned out the way it did. As I've been telling candidates who have come to see me, you can run the best campaign, you can even become the nominee, and you can have the election stolen from you. I do think that he knows that he's an illegitimate president. And because of that, he's very insecure about it. It wasn't on the level. It wasn't on the level in 2016. It could be, once again, not on the level.
So does anyone in the Democratic Party, the media mob, do they have a problem with Hillary Clinton's rhetoric? Did she incite insurrection? What about in August of last year when Hillary told Joe Biden not to concede the election under any circumstances? Take a look.
Joe Biden should not concede under any circumstances because I think this is going to drag out, and eventually I do believe he will win if we don't give an inch and if we are as focused and relentless as the other side.
Don't concede under any circumstances. So are Democrats going to hold her accountable for these statements? Are they going to feign their outrage as they always do? What about Nancy Pelosi, 2017? Speaker Pelosi tweeting, quote, "Our election was hijacked. There is no question." A few months later, the corrupt, congenital, compromised liar Adam Schiff said he had ample evidence that Donald Trump colluded with Russia to steal the election. We all know now that was a complete lie and a conspiracy theory. And of course, just last year, impeachment manager Jamie Raskin, that guy, he shared a politically charged conspiracy theory that Republicans were going to take away America's voting rights and civil rights and health care, and tweeting, quote, "We must fight," oh, this sounds familiar, "fight like hell to stop this assault on health care and the Constitution." Sounds like Donald Trump. Sounds like what they're all outraged about. Another impeachment manager, Eric Swalwell, he's not hanging out with his Chinese spy girlfriend. He also declared he would like to fight like hell. It's an impeachable offense to tell Americans to fight like hell, right? Will Raskin, Swalwell, will they now be impeached? Should they now recuse themselves from making that argument as they're trying to do in the U.S. Senate? Keep in mind, 2017, remember the deranged Bernie Sanders fan targeting Republican lawmakers on that baseball field? Remember, he shot multiple people. Steve Scalise almost died that day and the following days. In the lead up to the mass shooting, the gunman contacted his congressional office 10 times with complaints about the Republican stance on health care. More recently, an angry mob of Democrats surrounded, attacked Senator Rand Paul and his wife after the RNC. Rioters showing up at Senator Josh Hawley's front door where they harassed his wife and his young baby. Others targeted the home of Senator Lindsey Graham. The home of Mitch McConnell was targeted and vandalized. He was confronted in a restaurant. In May, a massive crowd of far-left agitators attempted to breach the White House. Next door, they lit historic St. John's Church, remember that, on fire. What happened at the White House was only one example of what was a wave of summer violence and riots, and that left at least 30 Americans dead, injured thousands of police officers. A federal courthouse was attacked for weeks on end. A police precinct literally burned to the ground. Others occupied. Businesses in dozens of cities looted, vandalized, lit ablaze. Retired police captain, remember David Dorn? He was murdered while protecting one of those businesses in St. Louis. Remember Horace Lorenzo Anderson Jr.? His father was on this show. He was murdered in the Chaz Chop Autonomous Summer of Love Spaghetti Pot Luck Dinner Zone in Seattle. Last summer's riots left a wake of devastation, and most Democrats, most in the media, they didn't care. Some even condoned, some supported these so-called demonstrations. They wouldn't call them riots. They lied to our face and said, oh, it's mostly peaceful. Then Kamala Harris, on top of everything she said, promoting a bail fund for violent rioters arrested. One violent offender freed from jail twice just because of this fund was now arrested for a third time. When is Kamala Harris going to be held responsible? When will any of the Democrats